were just talking 2 days ago, Skull, wasn't it?
Yeah.
About Nostradamus and his converso heritage.
That's so weird.
Oh yeah, he was 100% Jewish. He was just a Jew living in France. It was simple as that.
Right, and we here on the show understand the Edomite Kabbalistic history of these people. So we've gone through Nostradamus and Mother Shipton here. And now, what do you think about where either of them got these prophecies, this information from? I mean, because they are incredible when we hear them, right? We read her original poem, and it sounds like it's setting us up perfectly for what's coming. But what do you think about where this information for them came from?
Okay, that's a really good question, Reinhardt. And the answer, I promise you, you're not going to be able to predict, because this is something I've given a lot of thought to. I have a video where I go into a lot of detail about some of the historic books that have been with us for thousands of years. It is my personal belief that in 1902, we just didn't get the benefit of technologies that were existing before, and all these new companies and all these vast amounts of wealth from the elite that started all these new corporations and the inventions themselves. But in 1902, 1903, 1904, all kinds of ancient translations from very old texts and books also were popularized, like the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis epic of Akkad and Babylon, and even the Book of Enoch, the Ethiopic translation of the Book of Enoch. So we have these instances of, after these resets or the time periods when people thought there was going to be a reset, where these libraries are reintroduced to the public. I believe that there are underground repositories that have these books. I absolutely believe that the story of Mother Shipton is based off an actual witch, but she never put that material in a poem. I believe that there's fact and fiction mixed here. And I believe that the narrative about the future is something that somebody introduced who had the hard data, somebody who knows about the Phoenix. And this is what we find in the Dutch Oralind manuscript. This is what we find in the Colburn Bible. Colburn Bible is fantastic, all about the doom shape. It's a whole different version of the Exodus story than what's in the Old Testament. It's the same story about the Israelites in Egypt and how they escaped during the 10 plagues, but it's so much more scientific and realistic than what's said in it. And you need to read the Colburn Bible, or just watch my video. Have a whole video breakdown of the Colburn Bible version of the doom shape and when it appeared in different times in history. So your question, my answer to your question, Reinhardt, is that these texts are being preserved underground through these resets, and the information from these beliefs and texts is being leaked to the public through different mediums. And this is how this information is. But that's Mother Shipton version. The Nostradamus version is very different. The Nostradamus version, in his letter to King Louis or King Henry, it's published by Mario Reading. In Nostradamus's letter, Michel de Nostradam specifically admits to being of Jewish pedigree, and that he was only French in culture, and that he and his people had access to records about all these things that he put into the quatrains in the centuries. But because of Catholic persecution and because agents of the papacy were honing in on his family, and he had acquired this massive library where all these other Jews were giving him their history books and all that. So he codified all the prophecies that were found in all these books and then burned those books so the agents of the papacy couldn't find them. And he published the quatrains and codified them. And the codification is what was discovered by Mario Reading.
Jason, do you realize how much I'm smiling right now as you were talking about that? We were just talking 2 days ago, Skull, wasn't it? About Nostradamus and his converso heritage.
That's so weird.
Oh yeah, he was 100% Jewish. He was just he was just a Jew living in France. It was simple as that.
Right, and we here on the show understand the Edomite Kabbalistic history of these people. Right. So it makes perfect sense when you look at a guy like this. But the information that he's put out, the predictions, use that in quotes, can't exactly be ignored and thrown in the trash.
Well, let me explain the origin. We have to go even deeper with this because these people have been credited with all kinds of amazing historic text translations and theories and ideas like the fake ass Albert Einstein. I just released a video about Albert Einstein showing how fake he was and everything that was reported about him in the early 1900s. The man did not come up with any type of mathematical theory to do all this. The establishment did, but they needed somebody to stand behind. He was an absolute failure. It's all in my video. So anyway, what happened was during the Middle Ages, there was a dearth of texts, so they became very, very valuable. And we have historical instances where different monarchs of different countries, like Hungary or Germany, Prussia, would put out, hey, if there's anybody that's got any books, I'll pay you 10 talents of silver if you'll just come over here and let my scribe copy it. You can take the book back. Books became so rare after the Dark Ages, moving into the Middle Ages, that these books, the only people that could afford books were Jewish moneylenders. And their Jewish moneylenders had this network set up all over Europe where they were sending a tremendous amount of wealth to the exilarchy. So a lot of people don't know, man, for about 600 years, Jews were basically raping Europe of all their money by sending it to the exilarchy. The exilarchy was a whole Jewish government set up in Muslim nations. And this operation had gone, the Jewish operatives were playing both sides of the fence during the entire Crusades. The whole backbone. Do what?
You don't say.
Shocking.
That has never happened.
Hang on a second, guys. I think we have the first for the paranormies. The Jews are playing both. Grognak, write this down. The Jews are playing both sides of the war. All right. This is the first thing I've ever heard that before. I'm joking.
So the main wealth from the transitional period between the Dark Ages and Middle Ages, which is it's highly controversial. No one can put actual years on those because different areas of Europe were becoming more enlightened than others at different times. But during that 300-year period between the Dark and the Middle Ages, we have a lot of references to the value of old books. So all these Jews came into possession of books because people would bring them the books and they would just give them some pennies on the dollar, which meant a whole lot to the person that had the book. So these Jews came up with these fantastic libraries, and by virtue of education, they become more educated. But they were also able to do the same thing they did in Babylon, which was to take other people's histories and write a series of texts bastardizing all these other people's heritage, and then turn around and claim those histories as their own. We call this the Old Testament. Now, when this happened in Babylon, I don't know if you guys are familiar with all the academic studies that have shown all the material from the Old Testament that came from the Atrahasis epic, the Gilgamesh epic, the Karseg tablets. I mean, this isn't the really conversation for this deal.
Right.
But there's a lot of academic studies that show word for word where all these passages came from different civilizations, like Moses being put in a basket, put on a river. This is exactly what happened to Sargon of Akkad 800 years earlier. There are many, many stories like this. Now, where we have fact being pulled away from fiction, those are fictional to me and to a lot of academics. But where we have the facts is the introduction of the Israelites. Now we have these Hurrian Hyksos people that have flooded the ancient world called the Amuru. I have a series of videos about them as well. The Old Testament is factual about the Israelites. It is absolutely fictitious about the Judeans. These two different threads of history run side by side in the Old Testament. One is absolutely real, the other one is false. And I have a whole playlist that shows you all the verses in the Bible that reveal all this. But I'm telling you this now because the same playbook was used in Babylon when the Jewish scribes were in Babylon going through the Babylonian and Assyrian libraries during the Jewish Babylonian captivity after Nebuchadnezzar II. What they did for the Old Testament, they did it again in Europe in that transitional period between the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, because they had 90% of the books of Europe, and they rewrote them and they interjected all these famous people and basically rewrote these histories like Pliny the Elder, Flavius Josephus, Philo Judaicus, Trismegistus, Hevelius. All these old histories, they rewrote them, made them look like they were Jewish participants rather than the people that they actually were. And when they put these series of prophecies together, they took them from all these different sources, and that's what Michael Nostradamus did. He put together the prophecies in chronological material from Trismegistus, who had got his material from all these different sources, but it was written through a Jewish filter. So when Nostradamus published all this, it was by virtue not of his own research, but because he was attached to a family that had a lot of money that had bought all these books and rewrote this material.